Hello everybody, my name is Lucas and I tear down VR games, apps, and experiences to help you build better VR. Today, Gravity Sketch. Gravity Sketch is a professional tool designed to help you create 3D models in VR. It is the most intuitive sense that you could have because we live in 3D. If we need to build 3D, we should do it in VR because that's where 3D lives. Using 2D software to build 3D objects just doesn't make sense. And Gravity Sketch does it really, really well. A lot of highlights that I'm going to make in this video, as well as some downsides that I think that could have been improved upon. But overall, this is a phenomenal user tool. It has a really, really, really intuitive and responsive experience that I'm going to dive into right now. Let's go. Gravity Sketch has updates constantly. I'm updating this application every 2-3 times a week. So right now I'm not going to do the update, but it is good to know they're constantly updating the application so that you've got the latest and greatest. Connecting the landing pad. So landing pad is actually their Gravity Sketch's hosting platform for the 3D models. It is a little odd why Gravity Sketch doesn't have their own, but I mean, it's not that bad. So I signed up for a landing pad account, of course, and that's where you can see my 3D models. Now, in order to navigate these little menus here, you can actually kind of see the carousel on the right and left sticks. And then the button here, obviously, is to kind of reorient. But I did kind of like these carousels that were given to me. I mean, if you notice that I've got, what is this? There's 12, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that right? I can always, what's cool is I can always use the grip and kind of just grab it down. So yeah, so 6 times 12 gives me 72 models that I can have, apparently, at least on here. Fairly empty space, Gravity Sketch all around. Not much going on here. Let's just go ahead and just start with a new sketch. If you noticed, as soon as I went to go press that menu button, it transformed my controller into a pointer. Really nice touch. I do like that. So let's just kind of go into some of the controls. The very first thing that you notice is you're kind of standing in a completely empty space. So there really is no environment here. All that's available is this grid. Now, while I understand where they're coming from, no distractions, at the same time, I am being immersed into the space that I want to create. So I will go to the menu here. Now, I do like this menu option. It is kind of like a heads-up display, and it's attached to my hand wherever I go. And it doesn't feel crowded. It's a good distance away from my face. It's a good size. I can see all of the things, and it's got nice big buttons. And you watch my controller transform. It transforms perfectly as I would imagine it to as I get closer. And all of these are, pull trigger activated. Obviously, I accidentally sketched, but I will kind of get into the controls of that here in a second. But I will go to the menu, and as you can see in the settings, I can control the workspace. So this was kind of a nice little touch here to have the menu, main menu, and then some additional menu options up top, what I thought was kind of neat. One of the beautiful things about Gravity Sketch is their menus, that I can, using the grip tool, I can grab this little bar, and I can put these tools wherever I want. So if I want my surface tool, if I want my, so this panel will change depending upon which one of these I'm clicking on, but I can keep my heads-up display tools in a position where I want them to. So this is something that I immediately fell in love with in terms of menus for VR specifically. And if I need to get rid of them, I can just come back to the menu. If I go to settings, it brings it back. If I go to layers, it brings it back. And then if I go to my volume, it brings it back. So excellent, excellent use of menus. This is probably one of my favorite aspects about Gravity Sketch that they did really, really right. And I think is a great model for all other tools. Very clear buttons. As you can see, the tooltips tell me exactly what this is. It is a little kind of close to my face and not very high contrast. Maybe if there was a black on white option, that might have been easier to see. But not a big deal at all. And all of these, every single one of them has a tooltip, which is phenomenal. I would have preferred if the tooltip also came with maybe a small description underneath. It's got big text, so it's easy to see, so I can read vertical lock very well. But if there was some type of additional subtext underneath that would let me know what it was going to do, that might be helpful. So like, for instance, with grid, I actually get, so with the left grip, you can actually pull the whole world around. So I can move the world wherever I want, and the grid shows up wherever my right hand is. And everything will snap to this grid. So let's say I want to take my tool here, I can snap, snap, snap. I'm using the volume tool, and so simple cube that is perfectly shaped to the environment. And again, you can move the entire world with double grips here. So pull in, pull out. This is the one tool that makes you feel like Tony Stark, I swear. Because if I use the revolve tool, for instance, with my left trigger, so I can move the revolve axis, and I can make it go through any point that I want to as well. So if I wanted to go through that point, if I wanted to go through that point, I can do that. And then let's just, I come back around if I want to. And then, it does have to connect to the points. That's interesting how the point method works. So it designates where it's going to stop based on the points. I didn't actually know that. That's something I just learned. But then as soon as I'm done building this, I can grab it and then I can shrink it proportionally to the space that it was in. Same thing with this one. I can grab it and I can shrink it. And then if I want to, I can grow and shrink the entire world as well, which is amazing. Now, let's say I don't want the grid system and I want to just kind of freely be able to do things however I want. I could do that as well. Let's say I want to have the world stand up in vertical lock. So that way I can't rotate the world around. I can only move it up and down and bring it closer and farther away, as well as continue to shrink and grow it. I'll start with this a lot of the time just because it makes viewing stuff a little bit easier. You don't get disoriented in the ups and downs. But as you can see already, just one of the things I want to note is how flexible you can be in a very short amount of time. I will say the color wheel is difficult to use. It's very precise in the way you get it. But the cool thing is that once you use it, so let's say I used it, it does get saved in my color wheel palette. That is another big piece that they got right, as well as changing the type of material. So if I want to make the material a toon comic kind of thing. Oh, there it goes. So you have to change it after the fact. But let me get back on track here. So I've kind of gone over some of the controls. One of the things is here you can see, and I swear I don't know how Oculus does this, but just by tapping on it, you can see the menu options arrive. So if I want to change the size of this tool, I just move left and right. And if this bubble here that you can see growing and shrinking, that's the grip tool. So if I want to do something like this, and then I want to grab it, I just bring it into the position. And then I grab it with the grip and I can move it. All of these controls are really, really intuitive. It takes a second to get used to them, but once you understand what you're trying to accomplish, it becomes very, very intuitive. So the controls, I think they do an excellent job with. There's also this reverse history tool. It does not reverse history the way you would imagine it to. So let's say if I were to do some edits here like this and move some stuff around, save that and then move it. If I go backwards in time, sometimes, as you can see, it doesn't go backwards with my edits. It just goes backwards on the moves. If I want to go backwards with the edits, I actually have to hit the undo button. So I can undo. Oh, and it doesn't actually look like I can undo those edits. So you got to be careful with how you're undoing edits sometimes, because that mechanism, the undo functionality, is still kind of working itself out. The environment is very empty, as I said. What you can do is you can go to the settings. So if I go to the settings, I can select between these different menu options in the settings, and one of them is the workspace. So this workspace has a couple of presets. Right now we're in the gray room. We can choose a black room, which I personally don't like because it's terrifying. There is the warehouse view, which puts you in a small warehouse, which is kind of nice, but one of the things that I'll get into later is the shadows, and it feels like I'm in a cartoon warehouse. So it kind of takes away from the feeling of me being somewhere. And then the last one is in a studio, which basically just puts this really ominous dark shadow behind me. And unfortunately, doesn't really contribute to the shadowing as much as I would like. Except maybe it does. Did I just figure something out here? Hold on, give me 1 second. I need to test something. It's not the environment. So one of the things that I was going to talk about was the lack of detail in models like this. But this is a very flat, I mean, the material itself is called flat. So that is another challenge here. If I try to change the colors, it's difficult to do because the color wheel will just be overlaid right on top of it. So it can be difficult to navigate. But this is a flat material. If I want to get shadows, I have to change the material. So if I do something like a reflective material, I actually kind of get more of those shadows that I didn't have before. So learn something new again. The cartoon material kind of does the same thing as well by outlining it in black and providing shadows. But let me delete all of this here. And the way to delete it is to literally grab it and then delete. Boop, and it disappears. There isn't, like I said, much of an environment here, so there's not really much to interact with. I previously mentioned that for proportions and sizing, I think things are really well designed and positioned. This tool does not work near as well as I would hope. So let's say it's positioned here. If I kind of make my object and then peer at it, it does change the lighting a little bit, but it only does it on one object. So it's not as clear as I was hoping it would be. So let's say if I were to take another color here and make a different object like this, and let me get a stroke in here as well. If I'm shining the light, I guess it does. Damn. So I've been using this program all wrong from the very beginning, and I've learned something new in trying to demonstrate its failures. So it actually does a really good job of adjusting the lighting so that you can see the object from different lighting angles. You just have to grab the flashlight and have the right material. Because if I go back to the non-reflective flat material, to the basic, if I put the light on it, of course it doesn't change colors. There's no shadows being registered on it at all. Big dumb. I am big dumb. Let's take the actual modeling tools, which I won't go into all of the modeling tools because that kind of takes away from some of the exploration of the object itself. But they do have a lot of primitive objects here. As an example, let's say I want to take a soft cube. I can just click and drop it, and it will actually be in proportion to my left hand. So I actually kind of have to do this. And if you hold it, you can change the size, which is kind of cool. Let's say now, because I know I need to change the material so that it's reflective. There we go. So that now I can actually cast some light on this thing and actually change where the shadows are. God, had I known. One of the things that you can do with this is the edit item. And you can see how the primitive only allows for a certain number of editable elements. There's a lot of mirroring tools that they've got so that you can mirror the object if you need multiple of them, of course. But there was one that I wanted to show you was the actual, just a general cube. They have recently released the subdivision tool, which is this, so convert to subdivision object. As you can see, I like to have the menus here. When I hover over like this, it does bring it really close to my face. But if you notice, look at this when I turn my head. The actual words move in relation to where I'm looking. That is a really, really neat touch because it's basically pushing the letters away from where I'm looking so that it's easier to read. That's another really great touch. But let's say I've converted this to my subdivision. So this is my subdivision. If I change the levels, I honestly don't quite fully understand how this subdivision tool works. And as you can see, I can kind of make some manipulations based upon these different attributes, but there's no tutorial for this, which unfortunately is kind of how you have to figure out some of the tools, is basically just by playing with them and figuring out what's working, what's not working, and how you want to really create your objects. Okay, so wanted to talk about some of the other aspects of VR experiences. This is a creator tool, so there's not a lot of other things. There's really no audio and sounds. The only locomotion really is what you can move around. But it is designed, because I can move the world around, it is very much designed to be a sitting experience as much as it is to be a standing experience. I find standing to be more fun, just because I can kind of look around the object if I need to, without having to spin it around or move the relation to things. And there's a lot of features that are baked into this. I can group objects together. So for instance, I do that, and then I've got a revolve here that goes like this, and let's say I want those to be like that. I can grab both of them, and then I can group them together so that if I move them, they move together. So that's a nice feature that's available, but there's plenty of these features, and everything is modifiable. It is not a full 3D modeling software application. Like, one of the things that does frustrate me is that when I size it, so it says 20%. 20% of what? Is that 20% meters? So let's say I go to a full 100%. This is giant. Do I need to grab this? Oh, there we go. Do I need to grab this and shrink it if this is going to be, okay, this is real size? So the actual dimensioning of things is a little difficult. And there are some glitches like that. So if you go from here and I go to Giant World, it does these really big bubbles here, but then as soon as I go back, it changes back to the normal size. So there are some little glitches here and there, but nothing huge. So like I said, there's no audio sounds. There's really no physics involved aside from things can float in 3D space, which does kind of give that Tony Stark, I can control reality feeling, which I really love. There's also no real environment here. The only cues are some haptics, very small haptics that happen when you hover over items and then when you grab them. But even grabbing them doesn't give me any haptic feedback as much as I would like. So overall, this is a very simple environment. It's a simple application because, nothing behind me, nothing to my east, nothing to my north or to my west. Literally just what's in front of me. But I can still fill this entire environment with amazing worlds. So let me just kind of show you some of the things that I've made in Gravity Sketch here. So I'll exit to the lobby. I don't know why it's kind of glitching out like this. But let's see. So one of the things that I am proud of is my Dr. Seuss tree. So it does kind of glitch you off by starting you at 0, 0, when obviously that's not where you want to be. So I'm going to move my world out. But as you can see here, I made this tree with a stroke, a couple of other strokes that I've modified, and then I took a simple geometry. For example, I'll show you how I kind of did this. I took a volume, I then took a square sketch, I polared it by, I think, like 12, honestly, it was a ton, and then I made sure it was low poly. And so then here, when I draw this, let me make sure that was the volume tool. Yep. Oh, I made sure it was point mode, so I can control that point at a time. But I just start here, and then I come out, and then I went down, and across, down, or whatever the case may be. And I kind of just put several points around until it felt about right. And then I pull the left trigger, and it'll stop where your last piece is. And now you've got this nice little kind of tree-esque hanging element. And if I need to adjust it, I can always just grab the whole item, click on the edit, and then I can move the individual pieces. So let's say I wanted to shrink that down. So I'm going to move that closer to the top. Say I wanted to pull all of these. So if I wanted to, I can adjust and grab all of them. That is really, really nice and intuitive. I can also change by spline. So right here on that tip, as you can see, it's just a point mode. If I go left and right, oh, I guess in this case I can't go to spline, which I will show in a second. You could actually change the orientation of what you're looking for. So something simple like that, and I was able to make these little tree-looking things. Let me show you the spline aspect, because let's say I wanted to do a surface, and let's make this a nice pretty surface, a red surface here. I can now do a left, so you hold the left trigger, and then the right trigger, and that will start the surface, like so. Now, if I wanted to edit this, I do have the option where I can select point by point, or I can select the whole line. And so if I grab this whole line, let me take a step back here. I can grab the whole line and move the whole thing if I want to, which is really, really nifty. Same thing with this top line and with this back line. So it'll grab the whole line element. And again, these are more subdivision tools that I don't quite understand what they're supposed to do. Loop U will loop through the whole thing. If I remove that and loop V, oh, I'm an idiot. I do know what those do. It's just looping against the different axes. And then mirrored will create a second one, of course. And then the snap, well, it doesn't do anything here, but it will ask me if I want to snap these. Oh, snap these with another object is what snap will do. But really, that's most of the application right there. I've showed you maybe 50% of what it is that's from a user perspective of what you need to do. It's all done with but a handful of these grips. And that is the beauty of this application. I don't need to learn, 50 different features in order to get my 3D model to work. Okay, the last thing I wanted to show you was just the keyboard. So as you can see, I've named this Dr. Seuss tree. I will say again, proportions-wise, text, great sizing. I mean, this is, for what I'm looking at, a perfect size of text. And I don't know the exact ratio, and I don't know what font size this is, but one hand out extended, whatever font that is the perfect size, as minimum size that I would imagine that you could go. But let's just say I wanted to export this. It is going to give me a, oh, I guess not. Let me save this sketch. Okay, so this does give me a keyboard. That file exists, overwrite. Another thing with the text that they do, they give it depth, which is necessary. Same thing on the keyboard. They give the letters depth, and that's really to just make sure that, that I can see the letters from all angles. It's a very simple element to a lot of the menus, but having just even a little bit of depth makes it easier to interact with. Now, as you can see also on my pencil, I get the option of standing or sitting. And so if I'm sitting, obviously I'm going to be up higher, and I can do this, but if I'm standing, it brings it down lower like a standing keyboard, which was a nice little perk. I mean, not necessarily necessary, but I do like having that option, at least the optionality. This is a standard, key. Oh, I do that so often. Standard keyboard and just stick kind of pressing thing. One thing that I really want to explore is a keyboard where I'm holding a sphere and I rotate to get to the letters. I would be curious if that was any faster. I doubt it, but I think it would be a much more fun user experience. But the thing that they definitely do well is that they don't bombard you with menus. Oh, shit, I cleared it. So let's just call this Dr. I probably misspelled Seuss that first time. Seuss. Oh. Test. What is interesting is that I do get haptic feedback for the keyboard as well, which is nice. So Dr. Seuss test. I will confirm, and that sends it up to landing pad. Upload. Oh, see, okay. I just found something out. I think that's something that would be worth updating and being a separate visual context. Having the upload successful on my hand, that's the first time I've seen that, and I've used this application like 15 times. Or 30 times, really. This is actually kind of nice, the report an issue with the menus, so being able to rotate and see extra information, as well as get the time. But really, ultimately, having all of the tools that you need, and this is any virtual application, having the tools that you need either in your hands, in menus that are in your hand accessible, or on your person is the way to go. Menus that are just free-floating around are the worst way to do it, because that takes me out of that removes control from the user, and I like to have control of my space. I can sacrifice some things, but if and only if it is hyper intuitive to have it not on my person. What I really love about Gravity Sketch is that there are not 1,000 features that are involved with it. This is another application that is deliberately focused on simplicity of the application, not trying to fancy anything up too much, and really hone in on the user experience in virtual reality. I have made about a half dozen plus models in Gravity Sketch, and I love it. I love the feeling of controlling my world. So I give Gravity Sketch 10 out of 10 stars. In terms of the actual software. In terms of the user experience, some of the things that I'd gone through, the physics, the audio, but overall it's an application that has sacrificed some elements of complexity in favor of the user experience, which it's really done well. And there's some aspects that aren't necessarily required. You know, it doesn't really need a giant environment. I would, though, appreciate an environment where, you know, if I'm going to sketch a tree, I can imagine myself in the desert, or I can imagine myself in the Arctic tundra, or in a jungle, or in a cityscape. Those would really add to that immersion level that was missing, what's missing with kind of the warehouse and that stuff. So in terms of, like I mentioned, the audio and even the environment or the interactivity, while not hyper, there's not a lot there when it comes down to it, and there doesn't need to be. It's not an application that really needs it. The thing that they did really well for a creator tool, and it's really one of the reasons why this application does so well, they nailed menus. Menus are not easy to do, especially in a 3D environment, and they nailed it. I think that Gravity Sketch should be the foreseeable model on how to do menus with a creator tool, like great 3D modeling. If you're going to do VR for video editing or photo editing, or if you're going to be doing game design, or really any tool that you're going to do 3-dimensional stuff. Shoot, let's say we're going to do Excel. The way that Gravity Sketch does tools right now is, in my opinion, the most intuitive. Another downside that I forgot to mention was there's not a lot of exploration in the application. At least nothing that guides me to do something. It is an environment where, like, here are the tools. Either you take the effort to learn them or you don't. There is nothing that's really guiding the user along to learning the different tools, learning how to become a better designer. I think that what could be super helpful in the onboarding process, while it does have some tutorial videos, is just a simple 1 or 2, follow along with me in 3D. I think that would be fantastic. You could very easily have another 3D modeler that is telling you and highlight the objects for you, and then highlight some of the space in front of you to create a very simple 3D object. I think that would be a phenomenal way to get people invested into the process of what you're doing, and simultaneously learn maybe 15 to 20% of the tools, but get them excited to continue to learn. If this is not going to be strictly a professional tool. However, it is looking like it is moving that way, where it is strictly a professional tool, and they're going to provide enterprise level type of support. But the application is very cheap. I mean, I think it's $30. And it is really, really fun. Now, you do kind of have to have a reason to do it. I like to make trees. That's just my thing. I've made a couple of trees and I like trees. In terms of immersion, I do have to give it a less better score than I would like to. I would probably give it a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10, specifically because of the lack of workspace environments that kind of take away from the realism. The option to even have sound, maybe some, low tones, kind of to engage me in the space, coupled with that workspace sound, that would be phenomenal. And then combined with a little bit more haptic feedback in terms of when I'm grabbing objects or moving them around, and a little bit more onboarding or showing me, on the tooltip, what does that tooltip really do? So these are some little things that would have enhanced the experience that they're going for without making it a completely separate application or without making it overwhelming, in my opinion. But I do have to give it a 10 out of 10 in terms of what it's trying to do. It does the job of making 3D models really, really easy. And that is why I really love Gravity Sketch. So I hope that this video has helped highlight some of the pros and cons of the virtual reality application, Gravity Sketch, and how you can use it in your own experiences that you are building to create better VR. If you need any help with any of the virtual reality games or experiences that you're building, let me know, and I'll see what I can do. Until next time, game on.